Live and Let Die is a 1973 Bond film that introduced the late, great Sir Roger Moore as 007 after Connery decided he was done with the role. The change was good. As far as I'm concerned, the Scotsman's final outing as James Bond was a farcical embarrassment that remains one of my least favorites in the entire series, so in hindsight, it was a bit of a blessing in disguise that the powers involved decided to go back to basics here, with a more grounded character.
Is this the stupid mother that tailed you uptown?
There seems to be some mistake. My name is...
Names is for tombstones, baby.
We've covered the first 7 entries in our Bond and Over Beers podcast, so have a listen if you're a fan of the franchise. Season 2 has started today with this first Moore entry, and it's a pretty good movie, packed to the brim with a memorable cast of villains led by the always amazing Yaphet Kotto, and one of the sexier hotties, Jane Seymour's Solitaire Yum Yum. Live and Let Die. As an early 70s Bond outing, it's only natural that it would get its own video game adaptation in the latter quarter of the following decade. And, well, here it is. Elite Systems International developed this thing for a slew of computers back in 1988, with frequent 007 computer game publisher Domark releasing it all over in that same year. This company dropped a ton of Bond titles during that era, including The Duel, a Mega Drive Genesis thing we took a look at a while back on this channel. It won't take very long for most people to realize that this clunky boat combat game wasn't intended to be a movie adaptation at all. Instead, it started development as a project called Aqua Blast. That's right, Aqua Blast. But hey, people gotta get paid, and licensed products sell, so here it is. Live and Let Die for the Amiga. Or perhaps you prefer the 8-bit Commodore 64 alternative? Maybe the ZX Spectrum? Live and Let Die was released for all of these kits, as well as the Atari ST and Amstrad, but we'll be almost entirely looking at the Amiga one here today, because it looks the nicest out of the ones I have access to. The Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum variants have very few differences outside of the obvious graphical ones. All of the courses remain the same, with the majority of the items and obstacles placed in the exact same areas. This thing kicks off with a map screen where you'll be able to select from one of 4 areas, with 3/4 of them acting as training stages, which is admittedly kind of a lazy excuse to hastily cover up the fact that this wasn't intended to be a Bond game. You know, if the year that this thing was released wasn't a good enough warning. As Bond, you'll get to practice your boating skills through some of the film's more iconic bodies of water, including the North Pole and Sahara Desert, before plopping down in a Louisiana bayou to take out Mr. Big. The controls work well enough, but personally I found the vessel tough to aim at times. Enemies and obstacles are everywhere from the get-go, which is fine, but your gas tank must have sprung a leak or be the size of a push mower's, because collecting fuel immediately becomes the main priority here. There are barrels all over the place to refill the meter, but they are often placed off to the sides or out of the way entirely, which makes them a real hassle to collect. It's hard to explain, but in this Amiga version I'd often slow down to collect them, yet somehow miss picking them up entirely. There are a lot of turns, and the boat rarely feels like it lines up properly with anything. Everything is after you all of the time, but it's things like boulders and tunnels that give me the biggest troubles. Like, I never know if I'll make it through the gaps because the trajectory of my vehicle just seems a bit off. The Commodore 64 alternative is a bit slower, so I didn't have the same problems collecting fuel or getting my vessel to do what I wanted, but neither version is great. The game basically degrades into a barrel-fetching fuckfest while the fun-looking action bits occur in the background. It sucks. The Bond boat can fire with the press of a button, and missiles can be deployed while holding action in conjunction with back on the throttle. Again, it's fine, but shooting shit all willy-nilly won't get you very far because you're liable to destroy each and every necessary fuel barrel in your path. To be completely transparent, I was only able to get to the second leg of these stages because of how strict the gas situation is. As far as I can tell, you have an unlimited amount of lives at your disposal, but death isn't what'll get you. It's the lack of fuel. Basically, you'll need to memorize where all of the drums are. I can't see any other way around it, because if you slow down, you still burn gas, so maintaining a high speed is necessary to get anywhere, which is easier said than done. What makes matters worse are the boats who dump nearly identical looking barrels that explode when hit when you get further into the missions. Like, yeah, sure, they are a different color, but everything looks the same on the horizon when you're clipping along at anything more than a few knots. From the little I've seen, there are quite a few different enemy types and obstacles to contend with. Most of them share the waterways with Bond, but a few aerial ones rain hellfire down on you as your vessel winds its way through the stages. Avoiding stuff is the name of the game here, as the only way to combat baddies in the skies is to vault off of log piles. It's a cool idea, but like I said, everything looks the same as it's careening towards you, so you might as well just focus on the barrels and be done with it. Cooksy's take on the Bond music is probably the best thing that these games have to offer. It starts out following that iconic Monty Norman theme before doing its own thing, and sounds pretty great overall. There are a few pieces here and there, but none during the action sequences, which is a bit of a letdown. For whatever reason, the ZX Spectrum counterpart opens with the third track from the Commodore version. I really can't recommend Live and Let Die for the ZX Spectrum. The thing's an unplayable heap of trash that controls about as well as a Tiger Electronics game. Most of the time, you can't even tell what is going on. Overall, I had the most fun playing the Commodore 64 version. The slower pace made it possible for me to grab fuel, and the little 007 jingle that plays when one is collected is a nice touch. Clearly, its Amiga counterpart looks the best, but it's too fast for its own good. The only good thing about the speedy pace is that you can coast a bit longer once your engines have been bled dry. Just think Rad Racer on the NES and how it allows you to roll into the next objective, even when the time is out. The Amiga, Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, Live and Let Die, Amiga, ZX Spectrum, The Sheriff Pepper Show, then back to the Commodore 64, Amiga. Now, all of them together. What a waste of potential. This game sucks, and I'm pretty sure Domark knew it, which is likely why they added the Live and Let Die name.
Hell no!
Oh, you said it, Sheriff. Next time on this channel, more Bond, so stay tuned.